So let me move to. Well, I'll be very brief about this because I think I owe you an explanation about how, for God's sake, leisure studies can be linked to sustainable regional development. I mean, isn't leisure studies about theme parks and cinemas and shopping areas and that sort of stuff? Yes, it is. But for me, leisure is much more than that. And in order to sort of figure out that, you only have to think about housing gap, your own housing gap. Because that's about play. And play is about risk-taking. And play is about competition. And play is about emotional energy. And all those sort of things we're looking for today to find new sources of planning. So I'm particularly interested in how deep qualities of leisure, play, culture, we talk about culture, they can energize new forms of planning which take on board this whole issue of sustainable development, which is then in this conference translated into resilience. Resilience being about adaptivity, being about thinking new possible futures in the context of challenges, in the context of urgent agendas, etc., etc. So this is my biographical thematic map, and that links leisure to sustainable development. I deal with both worlds. I deal with the world of leisure, amenities, and I deal with the world of sustainable development and try to bridge the two in many different ways. So let me give you my pitch to begin with, because if I run out of time, then you know at least what I'm talking about. My central argument is that you know we are reframed space. Yes, we are talking about a city this morning. We're talking about streets and communities. But it's also the other level, the region. And what we found out in the Netherlands is today that we come from a very strong planning tradition in which planning has been divided into city planning and countryside planning. The countryside in the Netherlands was a space of production, agriculture. We're the best, so one of the best agricultural producing countries in the world. And the city was, you know, the city was social housing and all that. And there was no linkage between the city and the countryside. And today, this whole issue of globalization and sustainability is changing that frame. We more and more need regional frames. We need frames in which the city and the countryside are thought together in a certain sense. And that is changing the perspective on space. And that's also changing the way in which space is related to the nation-state. The nation-state borders are getting more fluid. So also these regions are reorienting themselves, getting out of the nation-state framework and trying to reposition themselves in much more functional spaces, economic spaces, infrastructural spaces, which in a certain sense are crisscrossing nation-state borders. So we're also faced with a challenge to find something of a spatial policy perspective which goes beyond nation-state borders, which is an absolutely challenging thing, to link national spatial planning to European spatial planning and then link that to the level of cross-national realities. And then, you know, okay, the region, yes, there's a lot to talk about, but what is a region? Does a region actually exist? Is there a new sort of closed box which we can call the region? No, it doesn't. Yeah, we have to understand also the region as something fluid, as some sort of layers of networks which are acting on different scales, which sometimes come together and create opportunities and then disappear again. So the region has to be understood as a process, much more than as a box, overlaying relationships. And then, you know, there's a question, okay, if the region is that sort of dynamic thing, how can we frame it? How can we make it understandable? How can we turn that into an energizing entity? And that's fascinating. That's a fascinating storyline that I wanted to develop with you. So we're looking at, you know, this interaction between resilience, the region, in my case, which is Euro region Maas Rhine, in the south of the Netherlands. Well, the south of the Netherlands, the southwest of Germany, and the northeast of Belgium. And there is a space there which is coming together in a very sort of fragmented way. But it's linked to the increasing road of the region, it's linked to the notions of resilience, and that's where I want to make this sort of statement, this growing importance of the regions, linked to this whole sort of globalization process, linked to this increasing importance of economic clusters, the Castell's argumentation, network in place and all that. It's also linked to the fact that today's weekly and daily urban systems are organized on a larger scale. At least in the Netherlands, and it's the case wider in northwestern Europe, people don't organize their lives any longer only in the level of cities. They organize their lives in the level of regions. They try to combine together places of work and residential places and places of leisure on a wider scale. So in people's mental framework, the region or the city, they're becoming new entities linked into much more composite sort of realities. So there's a search for that sort of new reality beyond the city-countryside dichotomy. A search for scales enabling more sustainable forms of development also in terms of sustainable ecological developments, but understood as a dynamic system. Okay, so this is behind it. I'm sure you're all aware of this, the search for interaction between capitals and the values, and all these capitals are active in different scales also, so you want to have some sort of interaction between the scales, and again there's a search for agendas which are able to sort of fulfill that. And you know, behind this, again, this links into the other talks, our new sort of planning models. Up right down there, up to the left down there is the old sort of modernist planning model. If a place, in a certain sense, lost its economic value, we tended to demolish it, to begin a new cycle of economic development. But that's how we lost our cultural heritage in the Netherlands, at least linked to the textile industries and mining industries, because they got out of their sort of economic role in the 60s too early to be able to make use of the wave we're experiencing today. But today, we have to use that model. It's evolutionary model, which is a waving together of historical values and new values. And you leave time, you leave an object time to discover these new value chains. You're trying to sort of develop new value chains and give them time to develop. Again, linking into the community and find ways in which the community can prototype new sort of possible futures. So there's a whole toolkit being developed to come to this new sort of planning approach, evolutionary, regionally, sustainable development, looking at layers and how layers overlap with one another, looking at it from a triple P perspective, economic, ecological, socio-cultural values, looking at it also in terms of how to build new alliances around these new associations. It's very much also an agenda of social innovation. It's not just a planning innovation, it's social innovation. It's an innovation about how to organize new connections and new alliances. So let's move to my case here, because that's, I think, the most important thing. How much time now? 10 minutes or something? Oh, right, okay, I'll rush through my case. The Eurasian Maas Line, this is the area. You see part of Germany there, Aachen, you see a part of the Netherlands, Limburg, you see two parts of Belgium, the dark green and the light green area. The dark green is the Walloon area. That's where they mostly speak French, mostly, because they also speak German. This is the very dark green area there in Belgium. It's the German-speaking community of Belgium. There's the Flemish-speaking community of Belgium. This is where it came from. This is Europe in the Middle Ages. You see the large Roman Empire, you see France, you see a bit of England down there also. And right in between in the circle there, you see sort of Eurasian Maas Line. And what's interesting here is this hodgepodge, this sort of mixture of strange spaces in the middle of Europe, overlapping different cultures, overlapping different sort of administrative units, etc., etc. And it's interesting also that the famous blue banana, this stretch of land which is the backbone of the economic development of Europe, all these sort of prosperous cities are situated in that sort of mismatch of places. And it's interesting to think through whether there's a relationship between the two. Whether this sort of mixed reality in which these places have been able to organize their lives is one way or another also sort of opening up innovative futures, opening up economic opportunities. So this is what was the situation there from the 1830s onwards. After Belgium had separated itself from the Netherlands, they called this the liberation movement, we call it separation movement. Belgium got rid of the Dutch, and the Dutch organized themselves after the 1830s. And that's how the region then was pictured in a very sort of strong perspective. And for the region, the only opportunity was to whine in The Hague. Yeah? Whining, speaking of whining. Well, lucky for them, they had a mining pit down there. So they were very important for the nation state. So there was an interest in the mining area down there. But today, the mining area is gone. And there is no real sort of alternative economic future for that region. So yeah, there is the biggest fault you can make is then start whining again. And that was the case until, say, a couple of years ago. But today we see a shift in orientation. Today we see a shift from a north-south orientation to an east-west orientation. Why should we rely on The Hague? Because there's nothing to come from The Hague. We should define our own future here again. And they have an interaction there of futures because on the other side of the border in Aachen they have the same experience. Because Aachen is on the margins of Germany, behind Cologne. And Liège has the same experience in Belgium because Liège has to cope with Antwerp and Brussels. And they also are sort of secondary third cities that they are marginal too. So in a certain sense what these cities are doing there is finding a new future for themselves. Yes, okay, I'll go through with it. So they're turning from a national perspective to much more. Oh, this is a shame because there was a gigantic map of the economic hotspots in Europe. Yes, the Rhine area, and the Randstad, and the Flemish sort of city area. But what I'm saying is that this region is reorienting itself. It's reorienting itself from a national administrative perspective to a much more functional perspective. Linking into economic zones, linking into new sort of dynamics. I skip this because that's unimportant. But there is a challenge to find a storyline for this new region. There is a challenge to find something which can energize the sort of agenda you're making, to go beyond an administrative agenda for this. And that's where we're working at the moment. I mean, it's going on as we speak. We had a conversation in Aachen just yesterday about this. It's about, you know, it's about this. It's about how do you make a future new regional space, which people in a certain sense can experience as such, of which they are proud in a certain sense, which they can live, which they can carry on as ambassadors again. And that's where a big project comes in. We are trying to get all kinds of possible carriers into this new notion of space. One is the old mining area. There's the mining area which crisscrosses Germany, the south of Limburg, the Netherlands, and Belgium. And on top of that mining area now, there's a totally new landscape developing. A landscape of shopping areas, a landscape of theme parks, a landscape of, well, playgrounds, a landscape of landscape parks, etc., etc. You could think that park together. And it's a cross-border park, a cross-border experience. And already touristic routes are being developed to allow people to experience that sort of commonality, of cross-border commonality. But there are other projects too. This is an inventory of all the old tracks which have disappeared in the region. There was a gigantic amount of tracks that disappeared. And today we're starting a program to reinvent the tracks again, to bring them back in the consciousness of the people, to give them some sort of connection again. Okay, let me skip through this because of time. Energy is an agenda. It's a very important agenda. And we're trying to think through the possibility of using the region as a sort of laboratory for new energy infrastructures, using the sort of ingenuity of the Germans with the energy producing tradition of the Dutch. Combining that in this region would be fascinating to do, so that's an opportunity. But there's also, you know, a cultural challenge. Cultural institutions are already sort of trying to organize this cross-border reality. Right down there, you see the Schlickbacher Festival, which is in Aachen. It's an Aachen festival. I spoke to the cultural manager yesterday about the Schlickbacher Festival. It's now a two-city festival. It's situated in Aachen and in Heerlen, the Netherlands. And he said, I can do things in Heerlen I could never do in Germany because of this specific culture policy we have in Germany. So I can use Heerlen as an experimentation ground for things I can't do here. So at the same time, this goes also the other way around. Yes, I know it's time. And we have, so there's an agenda of events now being developed. And the events are in a certain sense linked together. Let me just quickly mention two events. The IBA project. We're trying to create an IBA project in Parkstad Heerlen. IBA is, of course, a long German history of IBAs, temporary collection of interest in the project, public-private collaboration for 5 years, doing something with restructuring. And now there's an IBA project being developed for Parkstad Heerlen, which tries to, in a certain sense, re-image Heerlen's link to Aachen, the German-Dutch crossing border experience. And this is, we're bidding for in the European Capital of Culture in 2018. This is the Maastricht program, via 2018. Maastricht is positioning itself in relation to the EU region, and this is the program. This is the pitch. Europe Revisited. We are presenting the region as a laboratory for Europe. And I can tell you this is confusing the populist movement. The populists are in confusion because they are against Europe. But they are against the administrative Europe. They are against the big representational idea of Europe. This is not a Europe. This is the everyday experience of Europe. This is a sort of Europe their voters experience every day on an everyday reality. The cross-border experience on an everyday sort of level, if you like. Speaking different language, experiencing each other's television series, etc., etc. So we're trying to use that sort of energizing interest and difference in crossing the border